She was just a broke waitress rushing to visit her sick mother after another brutal shift, until a stranger's life dangled by a thread, and only her blood could save him. What she didn't know was that the man on that gurney wasn't just anybody. He was a billionaire, and her act of compassion would unravel a deadly conspiracy, heal a broken legacy, and awaken a love neither of them saw coming. In a world divided by status and secrets, one selfless act will change everything. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The fluorescent lights of the diner buzzed faintly overhead, casting a cold hue over the linoleum floors and cracked leather booths. It was nearly midnight, and most of the customers had long cleared out, except for an elderly man nursing black coffee at the far end of the counter. The radio played soft blues, but it did little to soothe the aching in Ella's feet or the weight that pressed heavily on her chest. She moved with quiet efficiency, clearing the last table with trembling hands, her apron smeared with grease and tomato stains from the long evening rush. She glanced up at the old clock above the cash register. 11:47 p.m. Just 13 minutes until she could clock out, but her mind wasn't on the time. It was on her mother, hooked up to 4 lines in a stark hospital room just a few blocks away. Ella didn't bother changing out of her uniform. She never did. Every second mattered, and besides, the laundromat trip had been sacrificed weeks ago to pay for another one of her mother's medications. She didn't care anymore what people thought of her, tired, broke, barely holding on. "Ella," her manager, Greg, called from the kitchen doorway, his voice weary but kind. "You sure you don't want me to call someone to take over your last hour tomorrow? You look, well, like hell." She forced a smile, wiping her hands on her apron. "Thanks, Greg. But I'll be fine." Greg opened his mouth to say more, but stopped. He'd learned not to push. Ella was the kind of person who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders and still smiled like it didn't crush her. Once the diner was closed, she stuffed her tips into a side pocket, 12 crumpled dollars and some change, and pushed through the heavy back door into the night. The streets were nearly empty, the city hushed and cold. She didn't have bus fare, so she walked briskly, arms folded over her chest. Her sneakers slapped the pavement, soles worn thin from months of wear. By the time she reached St. Agnes Hospital, her cheeks were wind-chilled and her fingers numb. She greeted the night nurse, who gave her a look that mixed sympathy and routine recognition. Ella had become a regular face, the daughter who never left, the one who always looked like she hadn't slept in days. Room 214 was dark except for the soft green glow of monitors. Martha, her mother, lay there, frail, sunken eyes closed, oxygen tubing humming softly. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled the air, making Ella's stomach turn. She moved quietly to the bedside, brushed a strand of hair off her mother's forehead, and kissed her gently. "Hi, Mama," she whispered. "I'm here." Her mother stirred slightly, but didn't wake. Ella sat in the visitor's chair, her bones aching, her back stiff from too many nights like this. After an hour, when she was sure her mother was sound asleep, she stepped into the hallway. She found an empty chair near the window and sat down, pulling her knees to her chest. Outside, the world kept spinning. Cars passed, windows glowed in distant apartments, people laughed and drank and slept in warm beds. And here she was, a waitress, broke, exhausted, trapped in a life that never let up. She stared at the floor, her throat tightening. She had thought of running away many times, just packing up and disappearing. No more bills, no more pain, no more pretending to be strong. But every time she thought about it, her mother's face would appear in her mind, and the guilt would crush her resolve. "You're all she has." The voice in her head never let her forget. A tear slid down her cheek before she could stop it. She rubbed it away angrily. Crying solved nothing. Dreaming solved nothing. This was real life, and in real life, people like her didn't get rescued. Just as she leaned back and closed her eyes, trying to escape her own thoughts, The sharp sound of rushing footsteps and urgent voices snapped her upright. She turned toward the ER doors as they burst open, and a gurney flew in, nurses and doctors surrounding it. Male, early 30s, car crash on I-84, multiple lacerations, head trauma, vitals unstable, a paramedic barked. Ella didn't mean to stare, but she did. The young man on the gurney was covered in blood, his face pale and motionless. She heard a nurse say his name, but it barely registered. Something in her stirred, a strange pull she didn't understand. The chaos swirled around her as they wheeled the man away. She sat frozen, unaware that fate had just cracked open a door that would change everything. The stark white corridors of St. Agnes Hospital trembled with urgency. Alarms beeped. Heels clicked across the floor. Somewhere down the hall, the whir of a gurney's wheels echoed as it careened through the automatic ER doors. Nurses scattered like birds startled from a wire, making room for the emergency team that stormed in, gripping latex gloves for bags and rapid trauma sheets. Ella sat still in the hard plastic chair, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. She had seen the chaos. Hospitals weren't quiet places, but this was different. Something about the voice of the paramedic stuck in her mind. Loud, clipped, on the edge of panic. Severe blood loss. We're running out of time, one of the doctors barked. We need a type O-negative transfusion stat. Ella blinked slowly, the words sinking into her consciousness like ink in water. O-negative. The hallway seemed to still for a moment as the crash doors swung shut behind the gurney. She stared at the place where they had disappeared, heart racing. That blood type, it was rare. And she had it. She rose slowly, her feet moving before her brain could reason with her body. She turned toward the nurse's station, where 2 staff members were on the phone, barking orders and typing madly into computer terminals. "Excuse me," Ella said, her voice hoarse. One of the nurses, a tall woman with curly hair pulled tightly under her cap, barely looked up. "Ma'am, please have a seat. We're handling an emergency." "I know," Ella said. "That man, the one who just came in. You said he needed O-negative blood." The nurse paused now, eyebrows raising slightly. "Yes. He lost too much too fast. Our supplies tapped out until morning." "Why?" Ella took a deep breath. "I'm O-negative." The other nurse turned. "You sure?" "I've donated before." "I have the card in my wallet," she said, already pulling out a battered leather billfold from her apron pocket. There was a brief silence, then movement. "Fast. Come with me," the first nurse said. "Now." They led her down a side hallway into the blood donation room, small and cold. The overhead light hummed dully, casting shadows over the sterile surfaces. A phlebotomist entered quickly, taking Ella's vitals and checking her ID. "You haven't eaten tonight, have you?" he asked. "No," she replied, "but I'll be fine." Lightheadedness, nausea. "I said I'll be fine," she repeated. The nurse gave her a look that teetered between caution and respect. He said nothing more. Minutes later, Ella lay on a reclined chair, sleeve rolled up, needle in her arm. Her pulse beat rapidly under her skin, but her face was steady, calm. Through the thin wall, she could still hear the clamor from the trauma room. Doctors shouting orders. Monitors beeping. The desperate urgency of trying to keep someone from slipping away. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his story. But something had drawn her to act, without thinking, without pause. The phlebotomist kept checking on her, replacing full bags with new ones, his face tight with focus. "You're doing good," he murmured. "Will it be enough?" she asked. "I hope so." When it was over, she sat upright slowly. Her vision blurred, colors bending at the edges, and she gripped the armrest until it passed. Her limbs were heavy, like her blood had taken her strength with it. But she didn't care. "Is he going to make it?" she asked as the nurse removed the needle and pressed gauze to her arm. "They're doing everything they can," he said. She nodded and stood, shaky but determined. She didn't return to her mother's room. Instead, she walked to the hallway outside the trauma ward and sat down again in the same plastic chair. Her fingers dug into her knees. She stared at the door. She didn't know why she couldn't look away. Inside, a life was dangling by a thread, and part of her now flowed in that man's veins. The early hours of the morning descended over St. Agnes Hospital like a veil, quiet but not peaceful. The buzz of activity had dulled to murmurs, machines hummed like an orchestra of soft static, and the air carried that sterile coldness that settled into the bones of anyone who stayed too long. Ella sat on the edge of a hospital cot in the recovery room, her body slumped forward, head in her hands. A bandage covered the inside of her left elbow, and the sharp sting where the needle had pierced her skin still pulsed with every heartbeat. The nurse had tried to insist she lie back and rest for a while longer, but Ella had waved her off. Her chest ached, not from the blood loss, but from the familiar weight of everything else. She glanced at the plastic water bottle beside her, untouched. Her mouth was dry, but she didn't move. Her eyes kept drifting to the open doorway, half expecting someone to come in and tell her the man had died anyway, that her sacrifice hadn't mattered. That would be the most fitting end to a day like this, wouldn't it? But no one came. Just silence. A silence that allowed her thoughts to creep in again like smoke under a door. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out the small envelope she always carried. It was soft now, its corners bent, the ink smudged from being opened too many times. Inside were the hospital bills for her mother. Final notices. Red letters. Due dates past. She pulled them out slowly, laying each page in her lap like fragile glass. She didn't need to read them. She knew the numbers by heart. $2,154.83, emergency admission. $418.50, MRI scan. $312 for medication. $62.77, disposable supplies, non-reusable. And those were just the recent ones. Ella stared at the total, her vision blurring, not from tears, not entirely. She hadn't cried properly in months. Her body had learned to hold grief like a dam, high and wide and strong. But the pressure was always there, trembling behind the cracks. Her other pocket held the crumpled $12 she'd earned tonight, sticky with syrup and desperation. She folded the papers back into the envelope and clutched it tightly, like a secret she couldn't bear to let go of. Then she stood slowly. The room wavered around her, her knees nearly buckling. A nurse poked her head in just as Ella reached the door. "You sure you should be up?" she asked, frowning. "I'm fine," Ella whispered. Her voice was thin, too small in the heavy room. The nurse hesitated, then stepped aside. "You did a good thing tonight." Ella didn't answer. She moved back toward the hallway, one hand trailing the wall for balance. Her steps were uneven, quiet, like a ghost passing between worlds. Every fluorescent bulb overhead hummed like a question she didn't want to answer. When she reached her mother's room again, the old woman was still asleep. The same rise and fall of her chest. The same faint wheeze. The same tubes and wires and plastic smells. Ella didn't sit this time. She didn't have it in her. She leaned against the doorframe, staring at the woman who had raised her alone, who used to braid her hair before school, who laughed so hard at old sitcoms that she'd spill her tea. Now all of that was trapped beneath pale skin and silent suffering. Ella closed her eyes. "I gave my blood to save a stranger. And I can't even save you." Something twisted in her stomach. Was it anger? Exhaustion? Bitterness? Guilt? All of it. None of it. Just emptiness shaped like emotion. She turned away after a few minutes and made her way to the lobby. The sky was still dark, but the faint blush of dawn was peeking through the tall windows, cold blue-gray light filtering in, reflecting off the polished floors. She dropped into one of the cushioned chairs and let her head fall back. She didn't know if the man she'd saved would live. She didn't know how she'd keep her job, or her apartment, or her mother's treatment going. But she knew this. For the first time in a long time, she had done something that mattered. Something that reached beyond her endless loop of survival. Her arm throbbed. Her body ached. But somewhere, in a lockdown ICU room just a few floors away, a man was breathing because she didn't hesitate. She let her eyes close, just for a moment. The sun was rising. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor echoed faintly through the quiet hospital room. A shaft of pale morning light filtered in through the blinds, slicing across the white bedsheets and illuminating the bruised and battered face of the man lying motionless beneath them. Lucas Malcolm stirred. At first, it was a twitch barely perceptible. Then his brow furrowed, and his fingers curled weakly at his sides. The pain hit him before memory did. A searing wave that shot from his ribs down to his hips and pulsed behind his eyes like a drumbeat. He groaned softly, trying to move, but even the tilt of his head sent a ripple of agony through his body. "Mr. Malcolm," a voice said gently somewhere close. A hand touched his shoulder. "You're in the hospital. You've been in an accident, but you're safe now. You're going to be okay." His lips parted, parched and cracked. "Where?" His voice was hoarse, barely audible. "St. Agnes," the nurse replied. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. You had internal bleeding, 2 fractured ribs, and a concussion. You're lucky to be alive." Lucas blinked, trying to focus. The world swam in and out of clarity. His mind reached for something solid, images, names, details, but everything was jumbled like puzzle pieces from different boxes. Then, sharp and sudden, headlights, a screeching wheel, impact. He flinched involuntarily. "Easy," the nurse said, steadying him. "You don't have to remember everything now. You're safe. We've got you." He sank back into the pillows, the pain too loud for conversation. But her words rang in his head. "You're lucky to be alive." No, someone else made that luck. Later that morning, as Lucas drifted in and out of consciousness, a man in a gray suit appeared at the door to his room. Tall, clean-shaven, and carrying an air of silent precision, Thomas Whitaker, Lucas's longtime personal assistant and confidant, stepped inside. His sharp eyes swept over the monitors before they settled on his employer. Lucas cracked one eye open. "Thomas," he rasped. Thomas exhaled a sound of pure relief. "You have no idea how glad I am to hear your voice, sir." Lucas tried to lift his hand, then gave up and sighed. "What happened?" "You were driving back from the company gala when your brakes failed on the overpass. The car rolled twice before hitting the guardrail. You were unconscious when the paramedics got to you." Thomas's voice dipped. "You were critical. They didn't think you'd make it." Lucas closed his eyes, jaw tightening. "The car. Being inspected. I have a private team on it. But there's something else you should know." Lucas turned his head slightly, opening his eyes again. Thomas's gaze didn't waver. "They couldn't stabilize you at first. You lost a dangerous amount of blood, and the hospital didn't have your blood type in supply. They were minutes from losing you." Lucas furrowed his brow. "So how?" "A woman," Thomas said simply. "A donor. She was in the hospital visiting her mother. She overheard the nurses talking about your case and volunteered to give her blood." Lucas blinked, processing that. "She knew me?" Thomas shook his head. "No. Didn't ask for your name. Didn't ask for money. She just saw a stranger in need and gave what she could. Her name is Ella. Ella Cooper." The name settled into Lucas's mind like a stone in still water. He didn't know it, but something about it felt familiar. Anchoring. Thomas stepped closer. "She saved your life, sir. Without her, we'd be having a funeral right now." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. The sounds of machines and quiet hospital bustle drifted in from the hallway, but he heard none of it. "Find her," he said at last. Thomas tilted his head. "We already have. I took the liberty of digging a little deeper after the doctors told me what she did." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "She's a waitress at a downtown diner," Thomas continued. "Works the night shift. She's been in and out of this hospital for weeks. Her mother's being treated here for late-stage kidney failure. Ella's behind on every single bill. She's living paycheck to paycheck, barely scraping by." Lucas stared at the ceiling, something stirring in his chest. Guilt? Humility? Gratitude that felt too vast to name? "She gave me her blood," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "And I haven't even met her." "No," Thomas replied softly. "But I imagine she didn't do it for a thank you." Lucas's eyes burned suddenly, and he turned his head to the side, blinking quickly. He wasn't the kind of man who cried. Not when the stock market crashed. Not when boardroom wars broke out. Not even when his father died. But now, here he was, alive because a stranger gave him part of herself. "I want to see her," he said. "She left after the donation. Didn't even stay to find out who you were," Thomas said. "But we know where to find her." Lucas nodded once, slow and steady. "Then let's do that." And deep in his chest, beneath the bruises and broken bones, something new took root. Not just a debt, a purpose. It was raining the first time Lucas Malcolm stood across the street from Ella Cooper's apartment. The neighborhood was worn down, paint peeling from crooked fences, the gutters sagging with leaves. The building itself was an aging brick walk-up with rusted railings and flickering hallway. Lights that cast more shadow than illumination. Lucas watched from inside the back seat of a sleek black SUV, his driver waiting patiently, engine humming beneath them. Ella emerged from the front entrance, holding a paper bag in both hands. She wore the same navy blue diner uniform he'd seen in the photographs Thomas had shown him. Wrinkled, stained, her hair pulled back hastily. She moved quickly, head down, weaving through puddles on the cracked sidewalk. Lucas followed her with his eyes. "She looks younger than I imagined," he murmured. "She's 24, Thomas replied, seated beside him, a tablet in his lap. No siblings. No father in the picture. Her mother, Martha Cooper, was a seamstress before the illness. Her health started failing 2 years ago. Ella dropped out of college to take care of her. No insurance. No support." Lucas ran his fingers over his wristwatch, then tapped the glass once. "And she still didn't hesitate to save me." "No," Thomas said. "She didn't." Lucas's jaw clenched. "Find a way to erase every one of their hospital debts. Quietly. Through a charity or a hospital grant. I don't want her knowing it's from me. Not yet." "Yes, sir." That evening, at Malcolm Tower, the 47th floor conference room sat in brooding silence. The walls were glass, but the clouds outside had turned the skyline into a gray abyss. A single file sat in front of Lucas, thick with technical reports, timestamps, and photographs. The wreckage of his car, his brakes, wiring, onboard diagnostics, all detailed with the sterile clarity of professional sabotage. "They didn't just fail," he muttered, flipping a page. "They were cut." Thomas nodded grimly. "Sliced cleanly. We're not looking at an accident, Lucas. Someone wanted you dead." Lucas stared at the photo of the severed brake line, his breath slow and steady. Did the surveillance cameras at the parking garage pick up anything? Someone tampered with the footage. 2 hours of blank feed, just before your departure. "Which means someone with access," Lucas said, eyes narrowing. "Someone close." Thomas hesitated, then slid a second file toward him. "There's more. I didn't want to bring this to you until you were stronger. But it's your cousin." Lucas's eyes snapped up. "Daniel." Thomas opened the file. "He stood to inherit control of Malcolm Corp. if something were to happen to you. He's been pushing the board for months to vote on splitting your grandfather's legacy company into regional subsidiaries, against your grandfather's explicit wishes." Lucas's fingers curled around the edge of the table. Of course he did. That snake never did know the meaning of legacy. He stood, pacing toward the floor-to-ceiling window, his silhouette etched against the lightning-streaked sky. "Let me guess," he said. "No hard proof. Just breadcrumbs." "For now," Thomas replied. "But he's getting sloppy. There's a trail. We just need to follow it." Lucas nodded. Then he paused. "Bring Ella in." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure she'd want to see you? She deserves to know the truth." And, he hesitated, she's sharper than anyone gives her credit for. She saw things that night. She might have noticed something, someone, while she was at the hospital. Thomas didn't argue. The next day, Ella stepped into Malcolm Tower for the first time. She wore a thrifted gray blazer that didn't quite fit and shoes that pinched at the toes. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and glass, silent fountains bubbling against polished stone. She felt like an imposter just breathing the air. "Ms. Cooper?" a warm voice said. She turned. Lucas stood before her, still pale, still healing, but upright and sharp in a tailored suit that looked like it had been stitched by angels. His eyes were clear, steady, and strangely kind. "You," she said, almost forgetting to breathe. "You're okay." "I am," he replied. "Thanks to you." Ella looked down, flustered. "I wasn't expecting this. I thought someone just wanted to ask me questions about blood donation paperwork." Lucas smiled faintly. "I didn't want to overwhelm you, but I needed to meet you. In person." She nodded slowly. "I'm glad you're alive." "And I'm glad you are," he said. Then, after a pause, "There's more to this than you know, Ella. My accident, it wasn't random. Someone tried to kill me." Her eyes widened. "What?" He motioned toward the private elevator. "Please, let me explain. You've already saved my life once. I think you might help me save it again." She hesitated for only a moment before following him into the elevator. And as the doors closed behind them, something unspoken settled between them. Not just mystery or gratitude or curiosity, but all three entwined with something heavier. Fate. The boardroom on the top floor of Malcolm Tower was made for intimidation. 40-foot ceilings, glass walls overlooking the skyline, a gleaming mahogany table that reflected the overhead lights like polished ice. On a normal day, it housed billion-dollar conversations, mergers, acquisitions, and subtle declarations of war disguised as polite business. But today, Lucas Malcolm was holding court for something far more personal. At the far end of the table sat Daniel Malcolm, his cousin, dressed in a navy pinstripe suit that practically screamed inherited entitlement. His smirk was polite, his posture relaxed, too relaxed. He swirled the tumbler of scotch in his hand like he didn't have a care in the world. Lucas watched him with measured silence, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "You called this emergency meeting," Daniel said, raising an eyebrow. "But I've got a lunch with the Zurich team in an hour, so unless this is critical." "It is," Lucas interrupted, his voice cool and sharp. "Sit down." Around them, the other board members glanced at one another, unsure of what was coming, but sensing the tension like static in the air before a storm. Lucas stood slowly. He tapped a small remote, and the screen on the far wall lit up. A series of images appeared: security stills, timestamps, garage floor blueprints. Then came grainy footage, edited, corrupted. A gap in the digital trail. "This," Lucas said, "is the security feed from the garage the night of my crash. Or rather, what's left of it." Daniel's brows furrowed. Just enough for a trained observer to see the flicker of unease beneath the surface. "There's a 2-hour blackout, conveniently timed before I left the building," Lucas continued. "We initially believed it was a technical malfunction, but my private investigation team uncovered the software trail used to loop the footage, and the employee access code used to execute the override." He clicked again. The screen displayed a name and employee ID. Michael Fry, personal driver, Daniel Malcolm. The room shifted. A murmur passed around the table like the hiss of a gas flame. Daniel scoffed. "Are you accusing me of something? Based on a coincidence?" "Michael was my driver, sure, but I wasn't even in the building that night." "No, you weren't," Lucas cut in. "But your company ID was used to access the garage at 11:23 p.m., and your driver confessed under questioning. He gave us a signed statement detailing exactly who gave him the tools to disable my brakes." Lucas turned toward the doorway. "You can come in now." The glass doors opened, and in walked Ella, dressed in a crisp white blouse and charcoal slacks that made her look like she belonged in the tower, even if she didn't feel like it. She held a folder in her hands. Her face was calm, eyes steady, her presence commanding even in silence. "This is Ella Cooper," Lucas said. "The woman who saved my life. And the woman who uncovered the missing link." Ella stepped forward and opened the folder, laying out photographs across the table. One of the hospital nurses remembered seeing a man on the phone near the ER the night of Lucas's crash, she said. She didn't think anything of it until I described Daniel. The man looked nervous. When I asked the hospital to check the sign-in logs for visitors, there was no record of him. But the cameras at the side entrance caught his reflection in the glass, barely. And the time matches up to when the brake tampering occurred. Daniel's face drained of color. That's not admissible. Save it, Lucas snapped. This isn't a court. It's a reckoning. Daniel rose from his chair abruptly, knocking the tumbler to the floor with a sharp crack. You think you can just pin this on me? I've been here building this company while you were off playing philanthropist and jet-setting like some Playboy CEO. Maybe this company needs a leader with vision. You mean a leader willing to commit murder for a vote? Lucas asked, stepping closer. My grandfather built this company with honor, with integrity. You've done nothing but try to dismantle it for your own gain. Daniel opened his mouth, but at that moment, 2 uniformed men entered through the side door. Daniel Malcolm, one of them said, voice firm. You're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit corporate fraud. The sound of metal cuffs snapping shut filled the room like a final verdict. Daniel turned his eyes to Ella as he was led out. You don't know what you've done, he hissed. She didn't blink. I know exactly what I've done. Later that evening, after the boardroom had been cleared and silence settled once more over the tower, Lucas and Ella stood in his office. The rain had started again, pattering gently against the glass. You didn't have to help me, Lucas said quietly. You already gave me your blood. That was more than I could ever repay. Ella looked up at him. Maybe, but something told me it wasn't over. That you weren't just in danger. You were being hunted. I couldn't walk away from that. Lucas studied her, the way her hair framed her face, the quiet strength in her eyes. Not born of power or privilege, but of survival. You trusted me, he said. She shrugged. You believed me when no one else would. That's rare. Besides, you're not the only one with something to lose. Lucas stepped closer, their reflections blurring together in the glass behind them. Then maybe, he said, his voice low, we stop losing. Together. And for the first time in a long time, Ella didn't feel like an outsider in someone else's world. She felt like the beginning of something. The morning light that filtered into Ella Cooper's apartment was different now. Not the cold, biting sunlight of survival, of scraping by on coffee and hope, but something warmer. A quiet shift. As if the world had subtly agreed that she no longer had to brace herself for disaster every time she opened her eyes. The small kitchen was filled with the scent of cinnamon toast and vanilla coffee. Her mother, Martha, sat propped up in a wheelchair near the window, wrapped in a soft blanket. Color had returned to her face, still pale, but no longer the hollow shade of fading time. She was talking again, smiling again, even if her words came slowly and her hands trembled when she held her tea. Ella sat across from her, watching the light dance on the tabletop. Something inside her still didn't believe it. The overdue bills? Gone. Paid anonymously, but Ella knew deep down who had done it. Lucas never said it outright, but the way he avoided her eyes when she mentioned hospital costs was telling. She let him have his quiet gesture of kindness, and she didn't ask him to confirm it. A soft knock at the door broke the quiet. Ella opened it to find a well-dressed woman holding a sleek envelope. Miss Cooper, the woman smiled, extending the envelope with 2 hands. I'm from Malcolm Enterprises. Mr. Malcolm asked me to deliver this personally. Ella took it, heart thudding. The envelope was thick, textured, embossed with the Malcolm crest in silver. She closed the door gently and sat beside her mother, hands trembling as she opened it. Inside was a formal employment contract. Not a token job. Not charity. Director of Community Development. Beneath the title, a handwritten note. You've already shown me what it means to lead with heart. Let's make something real out of that. L. 3 weeks later, Ella walked into Malcolm Tower, not as a visitor, not as a stranger, but as a member of the executive team. Her first day wasn't in a corner office. It was at the heart of a brainstorming session with local educators and nonprofit leaders, discussing youth employment programs and affordable housing partnerships. The boardroom, once a fortress of cold calculation, now buzzed with collaboration. Lucas was there, leaning against the wall, observing more than leading. Watching her. Every now and then, their eyes would meet across the table, and she would catch the faintest glint in his pride, admiration, and something even deeper unspoken. She thrived. She listened, she spoke with intention, she challenged the traditionalists. Her voice wasn't polished like a business school graduate's, but it was real, grounded. When she spoke about community, she didn't speak from theory. She spoke from experience. And people listened. Later that week, Lucas invited her to a company retreat in Vermont, a quiet estate nestled in the mountains, built by his grandfather and rarely used. There, away from the city and the sterile world of skyscrapers, they walked through pine forests and shared meals over a crackling fire. One evening, as twilight turned the sky to deep lavender, Ella stood at the edge of the lake, barefoot on the dock, her hair tousled by the wind. Lucas stepped beside her, hands in his pockets, the smell of wood smoke clinging to his jacket. "I don't want to scare you off," he said softly, eyes on the water. "But I need to say this, even if it's too soon." Ella turned toward him, silent. "You didn't just save my life," he continued. "You changed it. You reminded me why this company mattered in the first place. Why people matter. You made me want to be better." She exhaled slowly, letting the silence fill the space between them. Then she took a step closer. "I didn't come into your life to change it," she said. "I just couldn't walk away from someone who needed help." Lucas looked at her then, really looked, and the weight of all they'd been through passed between them like electricity. The blood, the betrayal, the broken pieces stitched back together with quiet resilience. "I don't know where this is going," he said, voice low, "but I know I want you with me in it." Ella didn't reply. She leaned in and kissed him, soft and slow, and everything stilled. The lake, the trees, the aching in their chests. All of it paused for that moment of gravity between two souls who had once collided by chance. Now by choice. And when they finally pulled apart, the stars had begun to emerge, one by one, like promises kept. The morning breeze at the Malcolm Foundation's new community center carried the scent of fresh paint and blooming lilacs. Children laughed in the distance, playing on the brand-new playground just beyond the lawn. Volunteers moved in and out of the open glass doors, arms full of books, art supplies, and welcome kits. Ella Cooper stood on the balcony of the second floor, overlooking it all, arms crossed gently over her chest, a contented smile playing on her lips. Below, the ribbon-cutting ceremony had just concluded, the applause still echoing faintly as guests began to disperse. She had worn a soft cream dress today, simple and elegant, with her hair curled slightly around her shoulders. No more uniforms. No more rushed shifts under fluorescent diner lights. Just a life rebuilt from the ashes of struggle and reimagined with purpose. This wasn't just another building bearing the Malcolm name. It was the first of many she and Lucas had co-designed. Places not just of charity, but of transformation. Places where dreams could catch fire, where overlooked lives could find a way back to light. Lucas joined her quietly, stepping up beside her, one hand slipping into hers. He wore no suit today, just slacks and an open-collar shirt, sleeves rolled up, his hair tousled by the breeze. His other hand held a coffee, and his eyes danced as he looked out over the scene with her. "They love it," he said. "You did that." "No," she replied. "We did." He turned to face her more fully, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Do you remember the first time I saw you? You looked like you were ready to punch a nurse for a sandwich." She laughed softly, leaning into him. "I remember thinking you looked like someone who'd never heard the word no in his life." He grinned. "And now I hear it regularly. From you." They fell into a comfortable silence, their shoulders touching, hearts steady. Ella turned to him suddenly, her gaze sharp but warm. "Why did you really give me this job? After all of it?" Lucas held her eyes, serious now. "Because you're not just someone who saved my life. You challenged me. You showed me what it means to lead with empathy. You reminded me that money isn't worth a damn thing if it doesn't serve people." He paused, stepping closer, brushing his thumb gently across the back of her hand. "And because I fell in love with you." The words didn't drop like a bomb. They settled, like rain after drought, natural and inevitable. Ella's breath caught, but she didn't pull away. Her heart didn't race with fear, but with clarity. "I love you too," she whispered. It wasn't a declaration born of drama, or desperation. It was the kind of love that had been earned, in quiet conversations, in late-night hospital visits, in each impossible decision they had faced and overcome. They kissed then, beneath the morning sun, surrounded by the living, breathing proof of their journey. People smiling, children playing, hope no longer a distant concept but something tangible, something real. Later that day, they visited Martha. She was stronger now, seated upright, flipping through photos of the community center on a tablet. When Ella and Lucas entered the room, she lit up. "You two look like trouble," she said, grinning with her eyes. Lucas laughed, bending to kiss her cheek. "The good kind, I hope." "The kind that lasts," she replied. Ella sat beside her mother, holding her hand, and the three of them talked long into the afternoon, about the past, about what was lost and found, about the future they were finally allowed to imagine. And when the sun dipped low over the city, turning the windows to gold, Ella looked out once more, at a world that had once seemed too cruel to Hope, Indiana. Now it felt different. Not perfect, but possible. Because love, when given freely, without condition, without price, had changed everything.